next time you start a class. All right. Well, welcome to our first ever class on how should we eat. So, we're going to get into metabolic syndrome in just a second, but we got to start off with this. It's not your fault. Okay? 90% of you is not you. It's your microflora, your microbiome, or as we'll conduct ourselves today, our gut buddies. Okay? Inside of our intestines, our large intestine, that's our gut, inside of it, and we'll get into that in a few minutes later on, are a lot of bacteria. And those bacteria, if they are bad bacteria, they will say, hey, go to the fridge and find something that makes me happy. Okay? So for me, that's sugar. My bacteria love sugar. Okay? Some people, it's potato chips. Other people, it's pizza. It's all kinds of different bad stuff. And the problem with that bad stuff is that's the stuff that's making us sick. And we're sick and tired of being sick, and so we want answers. And so it's really been a lifelong journey for me to find these answers because my dad, he is 79 years old. He weighs about 175. He's 6'1". And I really thought, since he's a relatively thin person, and my mom's a relatively thin person, then, you know, I'm 6'1", I should get the skinny gene too. But it's not a skinny gene, it's our gut buddies. So my wife hates it when I share this little tidbit, but a little tidbit, which is really interesting, is they took mice and they fed fat mice skinny mice poop. Okay? So the skinny mice, they gathered up their poop and they fed it to the fat mice. And you know what? Those fat mice got skinny. All right? In reverse, they gathered up the fat mice poop and they fed it to the skinny mice, and the skinny mice got fat. So it shows us that our microbiome, our gut buddies, have a whole lot more to do with our health than we thought. And so if we continue to encourage, I always think about the bad gut buddies as if they're like gangs, you know, they're the Crips and the Bloods, and they're in my gut, they're battling it out, but they really don't care who wins because they're going to win. But I want my good gut buddies, my butt buddies, right? I want my good gut buddies to get in there and take over. And when they take over, you know what happens? The cravings stop. And when the cravings stop, guess what happens? You're eating the right foods, and the weight just comes off. Okay? I've lost about 50 pounds with just following this program. No exercise, and I've been there before, you know. Back in my 30s, I wanted to be able to run a 5K in 30 minutes, and I got to where I could pretty well do that. And I exercised 12 hours a week. It was like a part-time job, you know, so I didn't get paid for it. I wore out more machines in Ozark Fitness than I cared to admit to. But I did. I got out there and I put in the due diligence, and I lost a lot of weight. But it didn't stay. As soon as I quit exercising, it was right back. And then I went on the keto program, and I lost a lot of weight. And as soon as I quit, I went right back. Because the only reason why I was losing weight, I was doing calorie restriction, okay? I wasn't ever taking away some of the foods that were bad. So the first thing we have to remember is that our metabolic syndrome that we have, and I'm going to explain to you what metabolic syndrome is in a minute, is not our fault. We have bad gut buddies, and it's begging us. Because you know what it's like whenever you have a craving and you don't answer that craving. You know, that's what hangry is called. You know, that's low blood sugar, they say. But it's really, there is that. I'm not saying that that's a false thing, but our gut buddies tell us what to eat because it makes us want stuff. And these gut buddies are controlled by lectins, which are proteins in our food. Now, I got a lot of our information from the Plant Paradox book from Dr. Gundry, and I like his work a lot. My problem I have with Dr. Gundry is if he's a Christian man, he sure doesn't show it, okay? Because he talks about millions and billions of years ago, and I don't believe that for not a quarter of a half of 1 second, okay? And so whenever he talks to me, because I don't normally do a lot of reading because I don't have time to, but I listen to a lot of books. And so he reads his books, and so he's talking to me, right? So when he's talking to me, and he's telling me about millions and billions of years ago, I'm taking that and translating that to the history that I understand. That, you know, there were 7 days. God rested on the seventh. Then there was a Garden of Eden. Then man sinned, and then there was death. Okay, and then there was, people lived until, I'm not getting into too big of a Bible lesson, but people lived for, I don't know, a couple thousand years, and then we had a great flood. And then after the great flood, people lived a few more thousand years, how many ever, then we had Christ. And now we're about 2,000 years past Christ, or post Christ. I don't know how you say it. But that's how I look at the world. And so whenever I look at the world that way, I look at it and say, okay, when you're talking about millions and billions of years, where are we at? Okay? So, if you're a Christian person, you really want to get into knowing and understanding the history of the world, go to the Creation Museum there in Kentucky. Um, it's really got a lot of good information there. So, that is a 100-page document. I think it's printed front and back. Okay? Those of you who are on the live stream, if you want that document, you can contact our office, contact Jessica, and she will email a link to you for that document, or we actually email you the document. So it's not our fault. So we have metabolic syndrome. Well, what is metabolic syndrome and how do we treat it? Well, I got this photo and a lot of other photos because exercise will help. But so many of us, and when I say so many of us, myself, I'm not in good enough shape to go jogging. Okay? If I went jogging, I'd probably blow out both knees, need orthopedic surgery, right? Could even have a heart attack or a stroke, right? I don't have high blood pressure. I don't have high sugar, but I have so much weight I'm carrying with me, I could cause myself some really significant problems. And so if we have metabolic syndrome, we first have to get the weight off of us so we can exercise. Because exercise is awesome, and we really should do what's called a HIIT workout, where we have high intensity, short amount of time workouts. I don't think that we need to go jogging, but if you want to, you can. But there's a lot of different workouts we can do. I'm going to pick on this. They show fruit here. We're going to find out that fruit has, in our day and age that we have today, most people aren't missing meals unless they choose to. Okay? And so, in days gone by, people would, grow a big garden, can that food, and then that would be what covered them through the months that we didn't have fresh produce. So November through basically March. And then if you didn't have enough food that you canned out of your garden, you might be missing some meals. And so you would need some fat to carry you through the winter. Okay? And so fruit causes us to store fat. When our body encounters fruit, it thinks it's summertime. And so in summertime, you fatten up for the winter, just like a bear. And so I always encourage my patients to give fruit the boot. All right? Because fruit stores fat. And I don't know about you guys, but I know I don't need to store any more fat. All right? So I like those pictures because they mean well, but they say eat healthier, and yes, sugar causes us to store fat, and that's what's in fruit. Okay, is sugar, and it causes us to store fat. Would I rather see you eat an apple or a Snickers? Yeah, eat an apple, but don't eat either one. It has some cauliflower. Here we're talking about metabolic syndrome. I don't know. I guess this is some sort of drug or something. I don't know. I just took this off the internet. I really liked it because it shows you over here the primary treatment is fruit. No, fruit causes us to store fat. Okay. Diagnosed by physical examination blood tests. That we do that in our office, right? It says doubles the risk of coronary and artery disease. That's true. Yep. Predisposes people to anger, anxiety, and depression. That's all true. It says that it's characterized by increased blood pressure, high blood sugar levels, excess fat around the waist, high triglyceride levels, low levels of good cholesterol. Those are all true statements. I don't know. I guess that's true. But it's affecting more and more people. Okay? It's just kind of crazy. But I picked that particular slide just because this is not the treatment. The treatment does not include fruit. Fruit's going to help you to store more fat. And so it's people who mean well, but it's still, and that's the reason why they say when diet and exercise does not work, try Experdox or whatever it is, okay? Well, they're not giving you the right diet to follow, and so it's never going to work. You're going to need their product. Once again, metabolic syndrome, it does cause cancer, but the problem, the thing that's causing the cancer is the extra sugar that's in our bloodstream, or where we're getting the sugar from. Once again, fruit. So they're not there telling you not to eat the fruit. They're saying, this is the metabolic syndrome, you need to eat the fruit. Metabolic syndrome, the underlying mechanism in drug therapies. We don't need a bunch of drugs, we got to change what we put in our mouth. This is not a genetic problem. This isn't something, this is something that's totally possible for us to fix by just, because if we feed the good gut buddies, they will take over, okay? And they will say, you're out of here, okay? And so we just got to feed our good gut buddies. It's kind of hard to say. So, in our metabolic syndrome and diabetes, we do become overweight. We do get fatty liver. But why? Okay? We become insulin resistant. The insulin cannot get into the cells. Just another thing. We got another thing, and I blew it up there. It talks about stroke, coronary heart disease, type 2 diabetes, what causes it, how is it treated. And so then we blow that part up. It got kind of blurry as we're blowing things up. Since there's some studies suggest that metabolic syndrome is closely tied to individual metabolism, how the body processes food normally. And so we've been told that we have slow metabolisms. We need to speed our metabolism up. But actually, if you think about the foods that we eat, our metabolisms are doing exactly what the foods we are designed to do for our body. And so if we're into January now, if you're only going to be eating one meal a day because that's all you have available, or one meal every other day, then I'm ready, right? But the problem is that I'm going to eat, McDonald's always has a meal ready, but that's the meal that helps me store my fat. The problem that we have is that our cells are not working the way they're supposed to work. And so it's not calories in, calories out, as we've been told by nutritionists across the world. It's how are our cells working, okay? It says we need to lose weight. Well, heck yeah, we need to lose weight, but, I need to, I don't know, win the lottery. I can't just say that and it's going to happen. I have to have a process. And so I love all these things talk about everything, and it's just, you need to exercise, you need to get, raise your good cholesterol, get rid of your bad cholesterol. It has all these suggestions, but nothing that's really concrete. Once again, it talks about how it affects so many people. I'll blow that up for you. We're going to have higher triglycerides. We're going to have a blood pressure like this. We need to lose 3 to 5% of our weight. It's just crazy, all the different things that's out there. So with metabolic syndrome, we're having insulin resistance. We're going to be overweight. All this stuff. We already know that. I want to get to the part that I want to get to. There we go. That's what I was looking for. So in an ideal situation, insulin comes into the cell, and it's like a key. So the key goes in, and it opens up, and it says, glucose come in here, and that glucose goes to a part of the cell called a mitochondria. Have you heard that word before? So the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, all right? But I don't know about you, but I was raised on whole wheat bread. I was told that whole grains were better for you than all this processed stuff, okay? In the case of whole grains, there's a molecule or protein called WGA, wheat germ gluten. Whenever it goes in that same site receptor as the insulin does, and it stays forever. The only way you can ever change that about it is the cell dies and grows another cell, and then you have an opportunity. So instead of this opening up and the sugar coming into the cell and doing its thing, it shuts the sugar off and turns it into lipids or triglycerides. Okay? So we've been, I don't know about you, but my whole life, whole wheat bread. That's all I ever ate was brown bread. If it wasn't whole wheat, I didn't want it because I was told that was the way to go. But inside of whole wheat bread and whole grains, we have wheat germ gluten, and that causes us to store fat. So you'll never see me put another piece of brown bread in my mouth if I can help it, right? The next thing happens is we have lectins. And so we found out that all foods that contain seeds in them are fruits. And most of them are bad for you except for a few. Avocados, okra, and those are the two fruits that aren't bad for you, because the avocado has the sugar that's in it is outweighed by all its health benefits. The okra has its flesh is made up of stuff that's good for your gut buddies. Your gut buddy says, "Oh, yay!" Okay, and so tonight they're going to make up plates in the back there of some stuff I put in the air fryer, and we have some air fried okra that's been seasoned and that's been frozen, then air fried and seasoned, and then we have some air fried. Starts with an A. It's not avocado. It's not asparagus. It is artichoke. Seems like all the asparagus is also good for you, right? And so, but things like tomatoes, zucchini, squashes, pumpkins, cucumbers, all those have seeds in them, and all those contain lectins, and the lectin does the same thing to our cells that wheat germ gluten does, is it blocks the insulin from getting in there and allowing the sugar in. What else does it? Corn, wheat, oats, right? And so even if we pressure cook it, like you can, beans, legumes, peanuts, okay, and beans, they do the same thing. Now we can pressure cook the beans, and they can become what we call resistant starch, which will feed your good gut buddies. And I'm here to tell you, if you don't have very many good gut buddies and you eat some of those resistant starches from the beans, it'll give you a bellyache. Not just gas, but it'll give you a bellyache because your bad guys don't know what to do with it. They're like, what do I do with that? And so you start thinking about all the things that we call soul food. Biscuits and gravy, okay? What's milk for? Well, milk is to help fatten up calves so that they can get by on their own. So once again, milk comes in two forms, A1 and A2 protein milk. The casein A1 protein milk is what causes most people to be lactose intolerant. Casein A2 protein milk, a lot of people can actually handle that, but still yet it's milk designed to feed cows, not people, and so it helps us to store fat, okay? And so we have biscuits and gravy. So what is biscuits but wheat flour, which helps us to store fat? And so you think about our ancestors, scratching out their existence here in this country 100 years ago or 200 years ago, they are going to need foods like that to be able to survive the winter. But now that we are in a situation where we have a plethora of food, we have to now narrow our focus and say, I'm only going to eat the foods that's going to allow me to be healthy, because I don't need to store fat for the winter anymore. Because winter's really never coming. Winter comes, but as far as our body goes, it doesn't. So we've got lectins that block that receptor. We've got from corn, wheat, oats, barley, all those grains. The only grains that they recommend is millet. That's like what we give birds, right? They say you can pop the millet. I wanted to get some millet and pop it, and I didn't get a chance to do that. We've got some cassava pancakes that we're going to let you sample, and so that's from the cassava plant. So it's got a lot of good stuff in it. So the lectins is what really messes us up. It gets in there. Hi guys,
Hey.
come on in and have a seat.
Sorry we're late.
That's all right. So we will just go back for just a second. I actually flew through most of those. If you have a weight problem, it's not your fault. Okay, the reason why it's not your fault is that 90% of you is not you, it's your microflora, which is your microbiome, and your gut buddies. That's what we call it, is your gut buddies. It's the bacteria inside your small intestine, and so it's your gut buddies. And so we were just talking about how a lot of these things talk about drugs and different stuff, but the biggest thing is that they're showing you to eat fruit, and fruit doesn't fix the problem. Fruit causes the problem because fruit has glucose in it, and glucose is a sugar, and sugar helps you store fat. Okay, so the sugar helps you to store fat because, why is it storing fat? Because our cells have been blocked by our lectins, okay, and by the wheat germ gluten and different proteins, and so that's why we're insulin resistant, is because the insulin can't get to the cell because it's been blocked. So the cool thing is this, and we learned this from our chiropractic lecture, we replace 180 billion cells every single day of our life. And so as we're replacing those cells, and so a year from now we're going to have a different body. So as we're replacing those cells, we start eating the right foods, we're going to start growing ourselves a healthier, stronger, better body. And we're going to start having less insulin resistance because we're getting new cells and we're eating the right foods. So our metabolic syndrome that we have, it says it's from insulin resistance, and insulin resistance is a process by insulin is unable to transport glucose in the cell properly. And so it's important. You guys, I don't know if you remember this or not, but in biology, we learned about the mitochondria of the cell. Do you guys remember that or heard that term? The mitochondria is what processes that glucose. Now, get this. If the glucose can't get to the cell and the mitochondria can't get the glucose, what's that cell going to feed back to the brain? I'm hungry. Feed me. Right? And so our insulin receptor is blocked by a lectin protein from tomatoes or whatever, fruit, of some sort, or wheat or corn or whatever. Okay, so it's blocked, so the glucose channel doesn't open up, and so whatever food comes into us, instead of it going into the cell, it gets shunted off, made into lipids and triglycerides and bad cholesterol. Okay, because it's going to go into fat storage. So we're hungry. Okay, and so what do? We eat more food, and so then our body takes that food and turns it into glucose and sugar, and then we can't get it in the cell, and our cell says, I'm still hungry, so we eat more food, and now we're sitting there, we're going, oh, I ate them out of the house and home at China Garden. My belly hurts so much because I've eaten so much, and I'm still hungry, and I just can't put any more food in. And it's because our cells have been blocked off, and they're not getting the nutrition. So you can see it's not calories in, calories out, because our cells aren't even working right. And so this leaves a higher level of blood sugar, or sugar in the blood, and this leads to many things. Increased hunger. So our cells, our muscle cells, our fat cells, our liver cells, our heart cells, our brain cells, all these cells aren't getting the nutrition they need, right? And so as our sugar goes up, we're going to become more, diabetic type thing, have a higher A1C, and so we have more hunger, and because our cells aren't getting the nutrients we need, even that anybody who ever becomes type 2 diabetic, what do we see? We see their muscles get smaller. They're like, I used to have muscles like Popeye, and now I've got this here. What happened to me? Okay, we have weight gain. When we have weight gain, the more fat we store, the more estrogen we produce. Okay, and so we end up with man boobs, and we end up with the spare tire, and we end up having all these other issues because, all these things happen because we have insulin resistance, we're storing fat, we're producing estrogen, and we're crying at sad movies now. I used to be like, oh man, this is boring. Now we're like, and he lost the girl. So it happens, right? And so then we have high triglycerides, so we go and get our blood checked, and the doctor says, well, everything looks pretty good here, but your triglycerides are 200, and your cholesterol is off the charts. This is crazy. And so we get on a statin drug, and that causes all kinds of problems if we go that direction. I had a patient come in last night, and she said, everybody at work's taking this diabetic medication. How's that work? I said, well, the diabetic medication goes in there and it eats the sugar up out of the blood. I said, so you're still insulin resistant, but your body's not storing that extra sugar in the blood as fat anymore. It's eating it up, and so since it's eating it up, and if they're on a restrictive diet, and they're not, they're eating lower calories, they're going to naturally lose weight. I said, but as soon as that drug quits working or they get off of it, they're going to, because they never fix the underlying problem. And so eventually this here will lead to diabetes and dementia and cancer. You know what cancer loves? Cancer loves sugar, probably almost as much as I do, okay? And the more sugar we store in our bloodstream, the more, because we have constantly bacteria and cancer flowing through our body, but our innate intelligence says, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, and goes and takes care of it. But if we have a nice place for it to grow, because we're fertilizing it, we're going to find ourselves in trouble one day. And so we don't just want to lose weight, but we want to be healthy. So I'll probably come back to that picture several times because I have looked for months for a good picture to explain how this lectin works as far as it blocks this receptor. This doesn't open up and lose all that stuff. Here's one of the pictures I found. It shows you, good insulin sensitivity and low insulin sensitivity. And so it shows your pancreas has your insulin here. Your food that you eat has turned into sugar. And people go on the keto program. I was on the keto program, I lost some weight. The problem is when we eat a lot of protein, guess what that protein turns into? Sugar, right? So we're still getting insulin release from the protein. And so you can see over here, the insulin comes in and hooks onto the sugar, and then the sugar goes into the fat cells, and goes to the muscle cells, and goes to the liver cells, and everything, you see it's going in there the way it needs to, and you have just a little bit of sugar floating around in the blood. Over here, you have insulin resistance. It doesn't say why you have it, but you have it, okay? Because in medicine, things just miraculously appear. They don't tell you why. And so you have your pancreas releasing this. If you look here, actually less insulin it shows, right? And it shows that less sugar is going where it's supposed to be and having too much sugar in the blood. So we talked about lectins. They come from the foods that we eat. So it comes from corn, wheat, dairy, oats, tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, zucchini, pumpkins. Have I missed any? It's quite a bit, right? Like, oh crap, if it comes from that, what am I going to eat? Okay? Because that's all my favorite foods, right? Man, I went to the store several times. I got the little cherubs, and pop those in your mouth, and you bite into them, and it's got that sweet juice that squirts all over your mouth. Like, oh, this is great, But that's all going to help me store lectins and fat. So I don't eat cherubs anymore. I don't eat cucumbers anymore. Peppers, peppers the same thing. Anybody here Italian? I think you're pretty close to being Italian, aren't you? Close. So you think about Italians, what do they do? The people from Italy. They skin the tomato, they take the seeds out of it, and then they cook that flesh of the tomato forever. And so pressure cooking a tomato without seeds and skin on it destroys the lectins. And that's the reason why they do it. Okay? And so some of the things that the people in the olden days used to do were for a reason, because they found out whenever they would just eat those tomatoes, however, they would either get fatter or they'd be sick or whatever. Just like the first time that I pressure cooked some beans and ate those beans and my belly hurt because my gut buddies weren't ready for good food. They've been eating the bad food, And so I ate the good food and oh man, I had a belly ache. But a few months later, as I continued to work on my gut buddies and got them better, I made some pressure cooked beans and made it into chili and ate it, not a problem. But my wife hadn't ate the first round of beans, right? And so when she ate the second round of beans, she says, oh my gosh, my belly hurt so bad. I said, we got to work on your gut buddies. And she looks at me like, oh gosh. Here comes the gut buddy talk again, right? So what do they do in the body that causes health issues? And what they do in the body is they cause us to store fat, okay? And if we store fat and we can't get the sugar in, the cells can't work right. It goes back to what that last slide showed. So lectins are proteins designed by plants to resemble compounds that are considered harmful to the body. So this is the craziest part of it. Plants do not want to be eaten. You get that? And so part of, remember we talked about Christianity and all that stuff a while ago? Part of that being kicked out of the garden was that the plants now produce toxins, and when people would eat those plants, it would make them sick. And they call that lectins. So a very common lectin is this is a big word, lipopolysaccharides. We call them LPSs, okay? Easy way to remember LPSs, and I don't like to cuss, but it's little pieces of shit, okay? And in a few minutes, you're going to see why I'm calling that, because they truly are proteins in the small intestine that slip through the small intestine into the bloodstream. So what do we have in our small intestine? Poo. And so if something's slipping through there, it's a piece of poo, right? So that's the reason why, that's why I call it. So it says they're fragments of bacteria / proteins that are constantly being produced, and they ride on saturated fats out of the small intestine in a leaky gut situation. The gut is your small intestine. The immune system cannot tell the difference between the fragments of bacteria and a whole bacterium. So the immune system then treats the LPS like an infection, getting white blood cells involved, causing inflammation. So the LPSs get into our bloodstream, now we have inflammation. Now we have inflammation, we have more fat storage. When we have more inflammation, more fat storage, we end up with a higher estrogen production. We end up with higher blood sugar levels. And so you see how this metabolic syndrome also starts causing all these different problems. And it's all because the foods that we're eating is causing us to not be able to process our foods properly. So you have mistaken identity. So what happens is some of these cells will mimic other stuff, right? So we have mistaken identity. So lectin is attacked through the gut, the small intestine wall. So the LPS produces a hormone called xinon, and the xinon makes the tight junctions in the intestine weak, and it passes through. Then another way that these lectins work is to confuse the immune system. So you have this TLR, toll-like receptor, and it tells you if the protein's good or bad. And so we're going to find out, and they might say in here, GMO foods, right? So, you know, I don't know if you guys, how much you guys pay attention to crop reports or whatever, but they've taken the corn, fruit, seed, whatever that is, and they've mixed it with like spider DNA so that certain bugs won't eat on it. And they mixed it with other DNAs so certain other things don't happen to it. And they made everything Roundup ready. So that way, whenever they spray it with Roundup, it doesn't kill the plant. That's what Roundup ready means. But it kills all the other weeds and stuff, right? And so these foods, it looks like corn to us. It tastes like corn to me. Now we know that corn is a lectin and it's going to help us to store fat, because when you finish out a cow, what do? You corn feed that beef, right? And so we know that's going to help us store fat, but when we eat that corn, because I love corn, I'll just tell you, corn and mashed potatoes, that's one of my favorite things. Corn-fed beef, oh my gosh, I love a good molded beef, right? But you got to think about it. We are what we eat, and we're going to be whatever we eat eats. So if our cow is eating corn and we're trying to stay away from corn, then we're going to still have problems because we're eating the corn through the beef. It's kind of confusing, but it's truly remarkable. So these GMO foods, our body can't recognize it as if it's friend or foe, and so it says, I don't know what you are, you're a foe. So here we are, we're eating our corn. But it's not corn, it's whatever else, and our body says, inflammation, we're going to get rid of it through inflammation. And so now we're restoring water. You know, I was on a cruise one time and talked to this lady from South Africa, and she says, I said, I don't know why I can't lose weight. I said, I'm running, I know why. At that time I was running 5 miles a day. I said, I'm running 5 miles a day, I'm eating a keto diet, and I've lost 3 pounds in 4 months. Okay? I do not know what my problem is. I said, I've been die hard cold on it. And she says, you can't burn the ocean. Now I thought she was loopy, but I had so much inflammation on my body that no matter how much I ran, I couldn't burn any of it off because I have to get rid of the water first. Now, if anybody here's ever been to a bonfire, and I've been to plenty, you take a foam cup, you fill it with water, you stick it in the middle of the bonfire, and that foam cup will not burn until all the water's boiled out. How can we ever lose weight if we can't lose fat or burn our fat until all of our water is off of us? And how are we getting the water on us? Through inflammation. How are we getting the inflammation on us? Through our leaky gut, which is the LPSs get into our body. So we have these TLRs, and they identify stuff as friend or foe, but it's hard to do that whenever we have food that's not food. And so it causes us to have more fat storage and inflammation. And then we have the disrupt cellular communication, which we have like the WGA, where it mimics insulin and it never lets go, with devastating results including reduced muscle mass, starved brain, nerve cells, and plenty of fat. And so how many people you know right now who have a little bit of dementia, or even yourself having brain fog, or, you know, I was going to go here and do, what was I going to do? It's because those cells are being starved only because we can't get the insulin into them because something else is blocking that port. So here's a representation of our small intestine here, okay? And we've had some xinon released, and now that's breaking apart. And so we have some bacterial toxins coming through here. We have our LPSs coming in here. And they say on this slide here, this is autoimmunity against various tissue antigens. And so how many autoimmune problems are we having in our country today just because we have a leaky gut issue where our immune system keeps getting activated to go after something that should not be coming through. What gut lectins do to your gut? Healthy gut, tight junctions, right? Damaged gut, leaky and inflamed. And so it breaks apart, and then we have these cells coming through here, and they're not where they're supposed to be, right? And so our TLRs are like, friend or foe? I don't know, foe. You're like, I was a good guy. It's too bad, you know? This one here, this is actually from a company, and we're going to talk to you about their products later on if that's something that you want to do. This is how it should, this is your intestine. It's got microvilli. That's this right here. That's their little fingers. And on those fingers have little bitty fingers. And those fingers draw in nutrition. But whenever we have stuff in our body, like the lectins, okay, it causes this to break down. And what do you see down here? LPS. The LPSs are floating through there on saturated fats, on all kinds of stuff. And so is it any wonder that we now have issues with, like, say, cholesterol in our arteries? Because what did the LPSs float in on? They ride that surfboard of saturated fat right into our bloodstream. And so now we have extra fat, extra sugar, extra proteins, all this stuff in our body, and our body's like, what the heck do I do with that? So where's it send it to first? The liver. Our liver says, I am a filter, I get you, but now I'm all stored with fat. I am now a fatty liver, okay? And I can hold no more, okay? So it puts it back into the body. And so then you go get your blood drawn. You have high cholesterol, high triglycerides. You say, I don't know what to do, doctor. And the doctor says, not a problem. We have these things called statin drugs. Here, take a statin drug, okay? And so the statin drug, through a, chemical transformation, cleans this stuff out of your system. But once again, it doesn't fix the problem. It just covers it up temporarily. So, the 7 deadly disruptors that's going to cause us to have this leaky gut. Broad spectrum antibiotics. You see here, I put even arsenic and chicken. Did you realize, this is kind of crazy, but chicken, it'll say on there, naturally, whatever, taken care of. The chicken, they use arsenic to keep the breast of the chicken pink in the groceries because it's a natural antibiotic. Okay? So, I pick on the FDA a lot. Carrots are not FDA approved, but they're good for a lot of stuff. However, arsenic is FDA approved because they know it's toxic dose. And since they know that it's toxic dose, they know how much they can administer before you'll get sick. But carrots, I don't know. I've had so much carrot juice before that the palms of my hands turned orange. Okay? I used to drink about 1 quart to 2 quarts of carrot juice a day. Right? I've been everything from following the food pyramid, to vegan, vegetarian, to carnivore, to where I am today, right? Which is back to, a balanced diet. And so when I was a vegan, vegetarian, I drank a lot of carrot juice. Man, I tell you what, I could see in the dark like nobody's business. But I had orange palms and orange soles, It's non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs or NSAIDs. So this is what happened. Aspirin used to be the painkiller of the century. It was amazing, but people started getting ulcers. And they said, we've got to come up with something that people don't get ulcers from. So they came up with Advil and Aleve and Tylenol and all these other ones, right? Well, you know what they found out? They found out that these cause the same problems as the aspirin does in the stomach and the small intestine. The problem was they couldn't find it in the small intestine because they didn't have a camera that went in there and checked. And so since it was in the stomach, they said, we found the Holy Grail. We can have all of these. But those things also cause our gut to be leaky. Stomach acid blockers. Why do we have indigestion? Well, we have indigestion because we have wrong gut bodies. Artificial sweeteners. I forgot to bring that. There's a lot of stuff I forgot to bring, but I brought a lot of stuff anyway. In his book, he recommends that you can have Quest bars. Quest bars, when that book was written, were good. Quest bars now are decent, but they have sucralose in them, and sucralose is a bad sweetener. And so I've got 2 big boxes of Quest bars at my house, and I said, it's got sucralose. And so I was following I call it the commercial way of doing his program, and I lost some weight. but I didn't lose the weight until I got into just doing my own stuff. When I say doing my own stuff, if it's processed, I processed it because I went and bought the raw ingredients at the store and I did it myself. But if I went and got something that he said, oh, you can have this because it follows my guidelines, it worked. I didn't gain weight with it. I did lose weight with it, but it wasn't as effective as just taking the raw ingredients and processing it myself. So artificial sweeteners, but stevia and monk fruit and inulin do not cause leaky gut, nor do they cause insulin spikes, nor do they cause all the other problems that the other artificial sweeteners cause. And so I even sell my own stevia here because I think it's the best thing since sliced bread. Matter of fact, before I came into town today, I stopped at the house and I had a big tall glass of iced tea that had stevia in it. It tastes just like I was drinking sweet tea from anywhere. Endocrine disruptors. Oh my gosh, this section is so huge it took me 3 hours to compact it into this. So endocrine disruptors are low dose estrogen-like agents. So chemicals found in plastics. So you'll have to, excuse me, but you know, like Ziploc bags and saran wrap and all that stuff have phthalates in them. That's going to be down here somewhere. And those phthalates are low dose estrogen producers. Okay? And some of the stuff that we're going to feed you tonight, if you choose to eat it, was in a Ziploc bag because I was out of my other dishes. But I mostly use cast iron to cook in or glass. He says in his book he's not a big fan of cast iron because he's met people who have high iron from cooking in cast iron. And I would say that if you have high iron, quit cooking in it. But until you have high iron, I pick that over Teflon or aluminum or anything like that any day. I tell you what, I use my cast iron pot that my grandma cooked in. And so it's kind of like you know, whenever I'm cooking in that, I'm thinking about, you know, how things, you know, I cook on my electric stove and I know that she actually had a wood burner, you know, so it's a different type of way of doing things. Scented cosmetics, you know, and some of this stuff is going to take a while because we've been living our lives doing our thing for so long. It's going to take a while for us to, you know, get everything out of our diets and get our lives clean. But we got to have that beacon to always try to attain for. Preservatives, BHT and TBHQ, those are most commonly found in like whole wheat products. You know, I remember growing up, my dad, he ate, what is that stuff called? Branos or something like that. I don't know. It was Cracklin' Oat Bran. That's what it was. Cracklin' Oat Bran. And in the packaging, it would say BHA or BHT and TBHQ on it. He's like, what does that even mean? You know? And I didn't know what it meant. But you can go into your documents that you'll get tonight. And I don't think you guys have yours yet. But you'll have a packet of documents. And it tells you what all those words mean. You know, all those letters mean. But they're just, once again, a low-dose estrogen agent. Sunscreens and parabens, insecticides. I left that one in there because look at that beautiful word. Dichlorophenoltrioethane, which is DDT, is an insecticide. Right? That's the reason why it says DDT, because who wants to say that? Hormone disruptors mimic estrogen and cause cells to store fat. Genetic modified foods and herbicide that are Roundup ready. Constant exposure to blue light. If you guys ever look at my glasses, you'll sometimes see a blue light reflection in them. And the reason why is because blue light comes from the sun and it makes us think that we're in Alaska in the middle of summer. And so with the blue light constantly coming into our eyes, it's hard for us to shut down at night. And so knowing that I am exposed to computer screens all day long and everything, I just happen to put the blue blocker right into my glasses. And so that way it's easier for me to go to sleep at night. But some people don't realize that's an issue and they have a hard time sleeping at night. And so I encourage people to separate themselves from screens as soon as the sun goes down. You know, remember that we have every place that it's winter. Of course, not every place in the world right now is winter. In Australia, it's actually summer. But every place that it's winter, the days are shorter because at some time we need more sleep. And so we should rest more in the winter and work harder in summer, right? And so it's the blue light that keeps us from, our body thinks it's summer. And so that comes back to our fruits. We have fruit 24/7 all the time. Our body thinks it's summer, so it's storing fat for the winter. Okay, the sunlight, it's storing fat for the winter, and so it causes us to, it's 9 o'clock. I need to go. I need to get some food. I need to eat something. I need to go to bed. We found out that if we'll eat our last meal early in the day and wait until later in the day to eat our next meal, and maybe have a 12 to 18 hour fast between meals, or between your last meal and your first meal, not all of them, be tough to eat. That during that time, your body's not trying to digest food, but it's actually allowing your liver to cleanse itself and heal, your brain to cleanse itself and heal, everything to regenerate. And if we sleep longer periods, 8 to 10 hours of sleep, then we're going to be healthier, better rested. I know that most people don't get this opportunity, but I like to take a nap around 2 o'clock. Between 1:30 and 2 o'clock, I like to take a nap. And so my wife was driving me around yesterday because she wasn't back to work yet. And I said, well, it's 2 o'clock. And she says, what's that mean? I said, I'm taking a nap. I said, you're driving, I'm napping, and I like to take a nap. I'm a napper. My dad was a napper. Hey, he's 79. He takes one medication. It's okay. My mom, she was never a napper, but she's 75 and she doesn't take any medication. So I don't know. So here's our lectin sources. Refined starchy foods. Pasta. Not pasta, rice, potatoes. There's no commas in here. Pasta, rice, potatoes, potato chips, milk, bread, tortillas, pastry flours, crackers, cookies, cereal, sugar, agave, sweet, one or sunset, aspen flame K. That stuff there is actually pink. We made it in the laboratory when I was in organic chemistry. I was like, I will not put that in my body if I can help it, because that stuff is pink. Not because I don't like the color pink, but just we made it in the laboratory. We also made banana flavoring in the laboratory too. It was like, nope. Splenda, which is also sucralose, NutraSweet, aspartame, sweet and low, saccharin, diet drinks, maltodextrin. You can, and in your packet, it has all this stuff already listed. I don't have to go through all of it, but you can see if you're looking up there right now and you have any questions about why is this elected and how's it going to affect me, please ask me. I want to talk to you about that. So the, it's someplace. So your oils, soy, grapeseed, corn, peanut, cottonseed, safflower, sunflower, and partially hydrogenated, all that stuff, stay away from it. So the foods with the highest lectins are your chips, your pastas, your breads, your beers, your beans, your brown rice, your tomatoes, your potatoes, and your peanuts. And so this is kind of a breakdown of gluten. And so here it talks about how wheat is a protein, and here's gluten, and how it breaks into all these different things that causes inflammation. But over here we have our wheat germ gluten, which actually causes other issues that we haven't talked about. That most time people just say, oh, I'm allergic to gluten. Well, gluten's got an issue, but your wheat germ gluten never breaks from that cell. That cell has to die before you can ever, push forward. So our natural solutions, foods to eat. See handout, because here they all are. Common vitamin deficiencies, vitamin D, most commonly found in leaky gut situations. Okay, so 10,000 units of D3 a day. That's one of the products we offer in our office. It's a liquid form. It doesn't have a bad taste to it. We do offer the fish or krill oil. It's from a small, they recommend getting fish oil from a small fish. Well, there's nothing much smaller than a krill. DHA, magnesium, probiotic. The probiotics is going to be, so we've ruined our small intestines with our false sugars, or artificial sweeteners, our antibiotics, or NSAIDs. Those are the most 3 common things that people have problems with. And so then we go and take a probiotic. Now, probiotics come in 2 forms. There's the refrigerated ones, and then there's the spore form. I always recommend the spore form because you think about it. Our bodies are 98.6 degrees, and if you have to keep something refrigerated for it to be bioavailable to us, there's a good chance when it gets to our stomach and hits that acid, we're going to lose a lot of it. With the spore form, the stomach acid actually activates it, so when it gets to the small intestine, it proliferates. And so we are sowing these seeds of health, but then we have to follow it up with having our good gut buddies in there. Lab testing. So for myself, I went and I had a food sensitivity test ran at one of my colleagues' offices. I was going to go to the medical doctor and have it ran. That was going to be $10,000 plus. And I went to my colleague and I said, what do you charge for that? And he told me, and I said, I can pay that. And so for example, whenever I went to was on the cruise ship and talked to the South African lady, she said to me that I can't burn the ocean. Well, then after that, I went and got the test ran. Well, I was on the keto diet and I was running 5 miles a day, but this is what I was having. So for breakfast, I'd have 2 slices of bacon, 3 eggs, right? For lunch, I'd have or for snack, I'd have an almond butter. Lunch, I'd have a pork steak and a salad. And for supper, I'd have tuna and a salad, okay? And almond butter as my snack, pretty predominantly. So my food sensitivity test comes back. I'm sensitive to eggs, pork, tuna, milk, So all these things I was eating was causing inflammation in my body. And as soon as I quit eating those foods, I lost 15 pounds of water, just like that. So in this program, it's going to have things for you to eat. But what if you're sensitive to those things? What if you've got a leaky gut and you're sensitive to those things? You may not get the results that other people are getting because you're sensitive to those things. And so if you say, no, I'm just going to follow this and that's all I'm going to do, and then I might pick up a blood test later on, that's awesome. But if you're like I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I was ready to do whatever it took, I went ahead and got the test done. I started following this program, and then I was able to, hone in where I could, I can eat these foods. So the things I have tonight for you guys to sample and try are things that I can eat, right? I'm not gonna make you guys something I can't eat. Interesting things. Hey, anybody here like peanuts and peanut butter? Oh, I love it. A Reese's, it's like a gift from God. 94% of the people on Earth are born with a sensitivity to peanuts. Why? Because they've been GMO'd so much, so that they grow more and they grow bigger and we have more of them and blah, blah, blah. So we're just, that's one of the nuts I can't have. And here he talks a lot about, get some almond flour, get you some almonds, get some almond milk, almonds, 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 almonds. I'm sensitive to almonds, whatever. I'm sensitive to almonds. So, you can't, that's the thing about diet programs and food programs. It's hard to follow anything because they're geared generally not to you. And so in our office, we can take this general and we can gear it towards you. So we have our food sensitivity. Then we have our health panel that we run. It's a comprehensive metabolic panel. It's going to have, of course, your lipids in there, a CBC differential. A CRP is a C-reactive protein that measures the amount of inflammation in your body. Okay? So, like one time I was really sick and I had a CRP of like 300, and it's not supposed to be over 8. Okay? And so, when you have a leaky gut and you have these partial bacteria or full bacteria and your body is having an inflammatory response, people can walk around with 50 CPR because they have that much inflammation in them. A lot of people are low on iron and magnesium, okay? And so those are some supplements we also offer, but I don't want to put people on these supplements unless they need them. And so how am I going to know if you need them or not unless we do the blood test? Yes, ma'am.
So this leaky gut can cause you to have a low magnesium?
Yes. Because magnesium is one of the main things that our body uses to combat inflammation. You gotta understand, I've taken all my knowledge that I know about nutrition, plus Dr. Gundry's books, and I've gotten all of them, read all of them several times. And so it's about 400 hours worth of information, and I'm trying to compact it to about an hour long. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm not covering that you might have questions on, and please ask me, okay? And then, and then we're gonna give you his addendum to his books that's got, the foods to eat, the foods not to eat, why you shouldn't do some things, recipes for meals to prepare, just different things like that. And then, if that still doesn't satisfy you, he's got 3 books that I recommend for everybody. There's the Plant Paradox. The Plant Paradox has everything in it that you need to know in too much detail. Okay. Plant Paradox.
What was his name again?
Gundry.
Gundry. Okay.
Yeah, it's printed in your documents that we're going to give you. That's
Thanks.
all right. You ask all the questions you want to.
Okay.
Anyway, so this Plant Paradox book has all the information detailed. I loved it. That's what sold me on that idea. He has his own podcast on YouTube, and I've watched it for 2 or 3 years. The problem with his podcast is every time he gets to that point of why you should do what he says, because I'm a big on why, buy my book. Right? So finally one day I said, screw it, I'm buying the book. So I bought the book and I read it and I said, oh wow, this is eye-opening, okay? And then I went through and I bought the next book, which is the 30-day speedy trial, you know. And so basically he takes this 12-hour book, condenses it down to 3 hours, okay, and says, this is what you need to do. And I said, okay, that helped me so much because I was like going in 7,000 different directions trying to pull everything together. But that, the Paradox 30-day quick start was perfect. Then the next one I read was the longevity, because, you know, believe it or not, 24 years ago, I was just becoming a chiropractor. I was just getting out of chiropractic college. It was really wonderful, okay? Now, 24 years from now, I'll be 72. And so the first 24 years since then went by that fast. I expect the next 24 will as well. So I'm already thinking about where am I going to be when I'm in my 70s or 80s, and will I make it? And at the rate I'm going, I won't. And so I have to make some changes now so I can get there then. We're going to look at your uric acid, your LDH total, and your vitamin D. And so this is our test. This test here, I had a patient come in and I said, we run this test, and she says, I just had a bunch of tests ran. And my gynecologist, I said, oh, let me see what you had ran. She had about half of this stuff ran. It was $3,000. And I said, that's awesome. We charge $110. Okay? So this right here is 110, and the food sensitivity is 470. So it's a little, but we check for 186 different food groups. We do have a 96 food group test for 250, but I'm like, we're already drawing blood. Let's just find out everything so that way we have the best, you know, it's like open sights versus a scope that you can dial in, you know. We can dial into, you know, more specifically what you're going to need to get over your metabolic syndrome, having these lab tests on your side, okay, versus just saying, okay, here you go. So, I love that slide. I stole it from somebody. But, you know, that's exactly allergy testing, dieting, wellness, you know, all that stuff there is what it's going to take to get you out of the metabolic syndrome and out to a better way of life. So, I can't leave this without talking a little bit of chiropractic, right? This lady down here, she received chiropractic care for several weeks after suffering for 5 years with neck, mid-back, and neck and mid-back pain, frequent nighttime urination as a result of a head-on car accident. So, for whatever reason, this lady decided to have her DNA checked and her telomeres, okay? And what are telomeres, you asked? I heard you say it. Telomeres are aglets. You know what an aglet is? I didn't know until I read this article, right? An aglet is the plastic part at the end of your shoestring that keeps your shoestring from fraying out, right? So telomeres are aglets at the end of our DNA, and when we're born, they're at their longest, and as we get older, they shorten. So this lady, she gets chiropractic care, then after she's feeling better and doing a lot better, she gets her blood work redone, and her telomeres were longer, okay? So getting chiropractic care helps your DNA do better. Not eating lectins helps your DNA do better, okay? And so we're trying to help people grow their body the healthiest that it can be, from the food level to the nervous system level, and if there's anything else that we can come along and help you. Because I was talking to my kids, right? Because they're in the car with me all the time. And I said, I have patients come in day in and day out with the same problems. And am I supposed to make them believe or think that I'm going to adjust them for the rest of their life and that's going to help them? And it will, okay? The problem is that so many of them, if we could just get them on the right food program, their problems would go away, and guess what? They could see me a whole lot less. Do I want to see people less? No, I get paid a lot more whenever I see them a lot more. However, I want what's best for my patients. And what's best for my patients is to follow a program like this. So that way, you only need to get as much care as you need to get, because why do you continue to resubluxate? Why do you continue to not hold your adjustment? It's because you have stress in your body. Why do you have stress in your body? Because you have the wrong foods in your body causing inflammation, okay? And so there's so much we can do by the spinal adjustment, but you know, we're hitting that wall that now that we weren't hitting 100 years ago because of all the lectins that people have in their diets that they didn't have 100 years ago. And that's it. So how do we do? An hour exactly. All right? And that's what I was shooting for, is about an hour. You know, because I know I fall asleep about 10 minutes of a sermon in church, so, you know. That's only because I got metabolic syndrome. It makes me sleepy. Because we have an early service, you know, and it's not nap time yet. But I also do about 4 cups of coffee like this. I'm not falling asleep this time. So, are there any questions? Did all that make sense? So we're gonna get fruit the foot, all right? The root. We're gonna boot the fruit.
Boot the fruit.
Right? We're gonna get rid of the fruit because it has glucose, which is sugar, and sugar causes us to store fat. And that's for the summertime that we eat all the fruit, so we store fat for the wintertime. And like I was telling these folks before you guys got here, I'm not missing a meal unless I choose to, right? It's not like things were a couple hundred years ago where you might have to miss a meal because there was just no food. You know, I was just telling my kids the other day about Laura Ingalls Wilder. She wrote a book called Long Winter. You guys ever read that book? One winter I read that book. And so I'll just give you the shortness of it. They had moved to DeSmet, South Dakota, and they had just a small town there of maybe 20 people, okay? And their nearest neighbor was to the east at 40 miles, okay? And then it was just wilderness from there to the west coast. And so they were on the plains. There's no trees, right? All they have is like plains grass, and they were getting shipments of coal from this train. Well, they would get snow, and the snow would fill up the train track. And about the time they get the train track cleared, it would snow again. About the time they get the train track cleared, it'd snow again. And so now they went, 6 weeks without a shipment. They've got no coal. They've got no food, right? And so Paul, he gets to notice these 2 bachelors, and they have flapjacks every morning. Why are they eating flapjacks? Because they need to store fat because it's cold, and they need flapjacks. Okay, if we hit a spot where we have some sort of craziness happens and we don't know when we're getting our next meal, go get some biscuits and gravy, man. It's going to help you store some fat because you're going to need to, right? All my survival food, guess what? It's high calorie, going to cause me to have a heart disease if I eat that all the time, but I can't eat that except for in emergency situations when I don't know when I'm getting my next meal. So he realizes these guys are just, they're having, salted pork every day, and and he gets to looking around, and he realizes that one of the knot holes in the boards of their store just isn't right. And he goes over there with a sack and pulls the knot hole out, and wheat seed or grain comes out of the wall into his bag. He fills up a bag, probably a pound or 2, plugs the hole back up, and he says, "I'll pay you back in the spring." And he takes it because his family has no food. And he takes it home and gives it to Mom, and she has a coffee grinder, and she grinds that wheat into flour, and she makes brown bread, and that's all they have is that bread because they don't have no food. Now, they don't have any coal for heat either, so Paul says, I bet you that grass out there will burn. So he takes Laura out, and they cut the grass, and they make like braids of it, and they bring in as much as they can, and they feed the fire, and they eat lunch, and then they go back out, and they cut grass again until it gets dark, and they come back in, and they burn that grass, and they go to bed, and they get up the next morning, and they're just surviving. They're just barely getting by. But we're not in situations like that. So since we're not in situations like that, we don't need to eat like we were. And so we need to be eating foods that our body's going to utilize. It's going to help make us healthy and strong and not store fat. So things that I didn't get to putting into the talk that I